Hey friends, welcome back to High Point, and in this video you will see yet another important feminist literary critic known as Judith Butler, who has born in the year 1956. Okay, so before that, if you are looking for some online courses for your NET JRF English Language and Literature Paper 2 examination, then you can visit my website at www.highpoint.in. There we have divided the entire NTA syllabus for you under 11 subjects. You will find various topics and modules and subtopics and chapters. We have divided them for you, and after the free trial you can see everything that what we are providing for our students. If you wanted to join as a student of a family, you can join the course from the website itself. If you want to know more about the free bonuses of study guidelines and the free weekly test that we are providing for our students, you can use this WhatsApp number or the Instagram ID to reach out to me. And if you have not yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do subscribe and press the bell icon while you subscribe so that you get a notification whenever we upload a video. And at the same time, if you are also there in Instagram, you can follow me on Instagram too. My ID is right here. There too we are sharing a lot of variety of materials. Okay, now about Judith Butler. So far we have already seen various important eminent figures associated to feminism. Judith Butler is also an unavoidable pivotal figure in feminist literary criticism. Let's see about her life and literary career as a feminist or feminist literary critic. Butler is an American philosopher and gender theorist. Her major study was around gender, and she theorized gender theories. Okay, and her nationality is America. She is an American philosopher. Her works have significantly contributed to the field of political philosophy, feminist theory, queer and literary theory. So her contributions were mainly in these fields: political philosophy, feminist theory, queer and literary theory. Her works have influenced political philosophy, ethics, and the field of third wave feminism, queer theory, and literary theory. Okay, so like I said, she influenced many other fields as well, such as political philosophy, ethics, and the field of third wave feminism, queer theory, and literary theory. Moving on. Butler is best known for her book Gender Trouble. So we all are familiar with the work Gender Trouble. Who is the author of the work Gender Trouble? Judith Butler. Gender Trouble. The full title of the book is Gender Trouble, Feminism and the Subversion of Identity, which was published in the year 1990. And Bodies That Matter. This is also quite familiar book in feminism. Bodies That Matter on the Discursive Limits of Sex, published in 1993. So Butler is famous and known for these two works, Gender Trouble and Bodies That Matter, in which they challenge conventional notions of gender and develop their theory of gender performativity. So like I already told you, she mainly theorized gender theories or theories related to gender. So in these two works, famous works by her, she challenged the conventional notions of gender, the conventional concepts that we have about gender and gender identity, and she developed a theory related to gender and of gender performativity. This theory has had a major influence on feminist and queer scholarship. Her work is often studied and debated in film studies courses emphasizing gender studies and performativity of discourse. So in film studies also, her works often studied on the basis of her studies and theories. We look at films and we analyze them, we criticize them, we talk about gender issues discussed in films and all. Butler has spoken out on many contemporary political issues, including Israeli politics and in support of LGBT rights. So she politically was also so vibrant, and she made comments about political issues such as Israeli politics, and also she also supported LGBT rights. Now let's see Butler's important work, Gender Trouble, what she is discussing in this. And this work, full title, Gender Trouble, Feminism and the Subversion of Identity, published in 1990. In this, Butler criticizes one of the central assumptions of feminist theory, that there exists an identity and a subject that requires representation in politics and language. So here, in this work, Butler even criticizing the very basic and central assumption of feminist theory, that there exists an identity, feminine identity, female identity, and that identity need to get a representation in politics and language and literature. That's a false notion. There we are making a mistake. What is the mistake that Butler says? So what she mainly says, that when you define something and when you consider that notion as universal, everywhere equally it is applicable, then you are actually losing the very idea, the very meaning of that thing. Okay, so when you define an identity, when you identify feminine identity, and when you define that identity, what happens? You loses the meaning. Okay, you just cannot define femininity. How you can define femininity? You can only assume that the person who look like this, that is a feminine person, that is a woman. Who is dressed like this, who has this much long hair, who has this kind of behavior. But the person who is standing beyond that kind of definitions, who are they? Are they not females? Are they not women? So it's very difficult to define something. When you start to define something, you are losing the meaning. So Butler says that identity, if you recognize that, if you recognize the existence of an identity, that means you are excluding that identity from all other identities and you are defining it. So that's a mistake. If you are recognizing a particular identity and making it as a category and considering that category as universal, then you are making the same mistake that patriarchy does with masculine identity. So when you are identifying that kind of a universal identity as a subject that requires representation in politics and language, then that is a mistake. For Butler, women and woman are categories complicated by factors such as class, ethnicity and sexuality. See, any other category, women, transgender, transsexual, man, asexual or bisexual, every other category of sexualities, every other identities, they are complicated. You just cannot find a simple definition for women, because women got defined, or women or any other perception is perceived from the background of class, ethnicity and sexuality and caste. In India, we also consider caste when we define woman. So women, the problem, according to their background, according to the other factors related to this identity, their need is also different. So when you assume universality for this category, women or woman, so the European women, their definition is different from, or their issues and their problems are different from the third world country women, post-colonial society woman, or black woman, or caste Dalit woman. So it's different. The category get complicated. The women or woman as a category, their definition got complicated by the factors such as class, ethnicity and sexuality. Moreover, the universality presumed by these terms parallels the assumed universality of the patriarchy and erases the particularity of oppression in distinct times and places. So why she says that there is no need that we recognize female identity particularly and define it and find a particular space and representation for this identity in politics and language, because when you considering defining this identity, and when you consider this identity and the definition given to that identity as universal, you are making the same mistake when we consider patriarchy is universal. Patriarchy universally consider that masculinity is superior to femininity, or masculine power should be more respectful than female identity, right? So that is recognized universally. So that is a mistake, right? You just cannot assume, you just cannot define that masculine power, masculinity is superior, and masculine people are, or men are absolute while women are other. All these things are not correct. They are corrupted, or there are some issues related to such kind of notions. So when you consider, instead of masculinity, when you consider femininity as universal, then you are making the same mistake, same presumptions that patriarchy made about masculinity when it considered universal, patriarchy as universal, patriarchy as something superior. When you consider the universality of the category of women and women, it erases all the particularity of oppression in distinct times and places. So in distinct times, in different times and in different places, people face different kind of oppressions. It's not European women faces the same kind of oppression that an Indian woman face. Okay, it's not the same kind of oppression faced by an Afro-American woman. So these are particular categories. So when you consider women as a category, erases all the particularities of class, ethnicity and sexuality, then you are not considering the particular kind of oppression they have faced in distinct times and places. Now moving on. Butler thus eschews identity politics in favor of a new coalitional feminism that critiques the basis of identity and gender. So that's how she is criticizing the very basic belief that every other female or feminist literary critics, every other feminist literary critic has, that female identity needed distinct kind of representation and space in literature and in language or in political or social spheres. That is not needed, because as persons we are all different. We don't have the same kind of the identity. So particularly we need to consider all these complicated things, class, caste, gender, and we need to consider the sexual identity and the ethnic identities and all. So we need to consider them like that. We cannot consider them as universal. They challenge assumptions about the distinction often made between sex and gender, according to which sex is biological and while gender is culturally constructed. We cannot use sex and gender synonymously, because sex, you will get that sexual differences that you will get while you get birth, but gender is something that is culturally constructed after having the birth. From the surroundings, the way in which people are treating you will develop your gender. That was the common belief. But Butler says that there is no need that you distinct between sex and gender. It's a false distinction. Introduces that when you distinguish between sex and gender, that introduces a split into the supposedly unified subject of feminism. It's a unified identity. So it's a unified subject. Feminism, it cannot be. Feminism is a unified subject, and when you distinct sex and gender, what will happen? It will bring about a split into the supposedly unified subject of feminism. Sexed bodies cannot signify without gender. You born with female sexual organs. That's how you got treated like a woman after your birth. So it's not that fully we can distinguish between sex and gender. So that kind of distinction is not needed, because sexed bodies cannot signify, cannot be explained, and cannot be understood without gender, and the apparent existence of sex prior to discourse and cultural imposition is only an effect of the functioning of gender. So we feel that before we get a gender, we have a sex. Sexual diversion is there. The moment you born into this world, you have a sex, male or female, you have a sex. So this existence of sex prior to discourse, prior to the beginning of any discourse, prior that you acquire any language, or prior to any exercise of discourse or participation in a discourse and cultural impositions, is only an effect of functioning of gender. So identifying your sex itself is the effect of functioning of gender. So there is a gender already exists before your birth, and once your mother is conceived you in her womb. Okay, so the assumption that sex is prior to any discourse or any cultural imposition, that we think that we recognize whenever a baby is born, when you recognize the sex of that person, because there is a functioning of gender is already happening. Sex and gender are both constructed. See, we have names for the sex that baby has. When we recognize that sex, when a baby got birth, baby born into this world. So this notion of gender as well as sex, they both are constructed. They are not like sex is pre-existing and gender comes after once that baby participates in any discourse, or it's a culturally imposed thing. It's not always true. So that were the major arguments that Butler makes in her Gender Trouble, the book Gender Trouble. Now let's see some points related to Bodies That Matter on the Discursive Limits of Sex, published in the year 1993. This work seeks to clear up readings and supposed misreadings of performativity that view the enactment of sex or gender as a daily choice. Okay, so it's not a daily choice. Sex or gender is not a daily choice. It's a performed thing. Like we are performing as a wife, as a mother, as a woman. Sex and gender is also performative. Sex, so in this work, she mainly make it clear the readings and supposed misreading of related to the performativity of sex and gender. Butler emphasizes the role of repetition in performativity. So when you repeatedly perform something, that becomes an identity. Making use of Derrida's theory of iterability, which is a form of citationality. So here she says that repetition in performativity that emphasizes the role. So in order to emphasize this concept, she uses Derrida's theory of iterability, repetition. Performativity cannot be understood outside of a process of iterability, a regularized and constrained repetition of norms. So suppose I'll tell you an easy example. Suppose a person died and everybody is mourning around that person's coffin. That person is laid in his or her coffin, and all other living persons related to that person sits around and mourn and cry and weeping for the dead person, right? But when you go there and you suddenly laugh, even though you are not, not all the persons around that dead body is equally mournful or equally sad about the death of that person, right? Some person may feel that it is good that she or he died, right? So when you go there, suppose you go there and you laughed, what will happen? You actually breaking that performativity. You are not supposed to perform in that way when a person is dead and when everybody is mourning about the death of that person. So continuously what everybody has performed whenever a person dies, everybody mourns over the death of that person, even though that person was so cruel, right? So performative, the continuous, iterating, it's a performance that continuously repeated. So performativity cannot be understood without this process of repetition, a regularized, constrained repetition of norms. And this repetition is not performed by a subject. This repetition is what enables a subject and constitutes the temporal condition for the subject. So it is not that a person, subject will perform alone, but it will collectively repeated. This repetition is what enables the subject and constitutes the temporal condition for the subject. So in a time, in a particular space, what kind of performance that a person should do, that will be determined by this repetition, this performativity. Okay, so it mainly discusses these kind of things. This iterability implies that performance is not a singular act or event, but a ritualized production, a ritual reiterated under the under and through constraint, under and through the force of prohibition and taboo, with the threat of ostracism and even death, controlling and compelling the shape of the production, but not. Iterability implies that. So the repetition implies that it's not, performance is not a singular act. In a particular situation, in a particular time, you acted in certain way. That is not a performance. When you consider that performance as a ritual, see, when a dead person is there and you are supposed to mourn, that is a ritual that need to be practiced in that way only. If you are a woman, you need to do the chores. That is performed so in a repetitive manner. Women are doing that again and again the same way as a ritual. That's why it became a performance. That became that performance is required by every other woman, expected out of every other woman, like a ritual that cannot be broken by any other woman. If they have broken it, then that is a crime. So through force of prohibition as a taboo, these performances are done or undone. Okay, now let's see important works by Judith Butler. She has written many works. I just picked the important titles only. You can read along with me or pause the video, read these titles 2-3 times. Okay, the first one is Subjects of Desire, published in the 1987. Then comes Gender Trouble, 1990. The next work is Bodies That Matter, published in 1993. Women and Social Transformation, published in 2003. Undoing Life in 2004. Is Critique Secular, published in 2009. Census of the Subject, published in 2015. The Cure Intersectional in Contemporary Germany, published in 2018, very recently. Okay, I'll read the titles again, read along with me. Subjects of Desire, Gender Trouble, Bodies That Matter, Women and Social Transformation, Undoing Life, Is Critique Secular, Census of the Subject, The Cure Intersectional in Contemporary Germany. So these are some of the major works by Judith Butler. That's all about Judith Butler. I hope some ideas of Judith Butler is clear to you. And do remember the 2 major works done by or written by Judith Butler as a feminist literary critic. So that's all about this video. Don't forget to visit my website and also follow me on Instagram. And if you have not yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, subscribe to it and press the bell icon while you subscribe. And meet you in the next video session. Until then, stay tuned to High Point and be happy in your life. Ta-ta, bye-bye. Thank you.